week on Perspective, tariffs and trade and tough talk. How China and the U.S. could upstage the G20. This week, the leaders of the G20 will gather once again, this time in Buenos Aires, Argentina. It's the first time the summit has been held in South America, and it was hoped that at the center of this gathering of the world's most powerful countries would be the concerns and aspirations of a developing region that is anxious for new opportunities. Or so said Argentina's president. But the worry is this.
Minister, you need to give a reason why there was no joint communique.
The most recent summit, the APEC summit in Papua New Guinea, dissolved in rancor because of a clash between China and the United States. That there was no joint communique from APEC leaders may not seem like a big deal, but it highlighted the seriousness of the ongoing tit-for-tat trade row and war of words between two economic giants. New stiff tariffs now affect more than $300 billion worth of goods traded between the two countries. Driven by multi-billion-dollar international investments in infrastructure, China's so-called Belt and Road Initiative is described as a drive for global dominance and seen by many as a direct threat to the U.S. U.S. President Donald Trump and China's President Xi Jinping are scheduled to meet for dinner on the sidelines of the G20. But that political theater and the global ramifications of their dispute may well take center stage. This week on the program, a look at the U.S.-China relationship and how it's changed, what that means for Canada, and a look ahead at what to look for at the G20. We begin with the broad perspective. Steve Tsang is the director of the SOAS China Institute at the University of London, and he spoke to me from London. The differences, indeed the clashes that we're now seeing between the United States and China certainly amount to much more than just a trade war. How would you describe what we're seeing now?
I think what we are seeing is a basic shift in the way how the United States establishment as a whole is looking at relationship with China. And I think a lot of those changes are, in a sense, bipartisan, even though Donald Trump is taking a very partisan approach to the relationship with China.
Why do you think that's happening?
Well, it's happening, I think, partly because the United States establishment is now seeing that their previous policy of engaging with China in the last 40 years fails to deliver the result they expected. They wanted to see China move in the direction of democratization and therefore more like the United States. That has not happened. In contrast, China under Xi Jinping is becoming assertive and is therefore presenting itself as a competitor to the United States.
You've written about how, in some ways, China's position could be described as China first, or making China great. Tell me how that manifests itself in its foreign policy.
Well, Xi Jinping made it very, very clear that his objective is a kind of national rejuvenation. And in this process, he is taking a much more assertive approach in dealing with Taiwan and with China's other neighbors, whether we're talking about Southeast Asia as a whole in terms of the maritime disputes, or with Japan over the Diaoyu and Gaku Islands dispute, or indeed over China's approach towards the West. Here I mean geographically west to China, into Central Asia, the Middle East, and further west. With the Belt and Road Initiative, we are seeing a China that is asserting itself in its region and pushing further beyond. I think that is what makes the United States uncomfortable.
What's China's ambition here?
What kind of ambition is here? I think the ambition that Xi Jinping has is quite simply that China under Xi Jinping now requests and requires the rest of the world, including the United States, to pay it due respect, that China is embraced and accepted as a leading power in the world. Now, this is something which again poses a bit of a problem to the United States if it is not projecting the kind of values that the United States thinks are good and positive. And here you have a China under Xi Jinping trying to go out and make the world safe for authoritarianism, and therefore very much against what the United States want to see happen.
It's interesting you raised the point about being safe for authoritarianism, because this also comes at a time when liberal Western values are being challenged. What kind of a geopolitical shift does this really represent?
Well, what is happening in a geopolitical sense is that while China's neighbors, excepting Russia and perhaps North Korea, are not all that keen to see this change, they are also not entirely sure whether they can count on the United States, particularly under President Trump, to stand by them, and therefore none of them wants to be seen by Beijing as being on the wrong side. So we are seeing countries in the neighborhood of China tries to accommodate this reemergence of China and this more assertive China.
Some have suggested we are perhaps on the verge of another Cold War. What do you think?
I don't think we are going to see a return to the Cold War. The Cold War was a very particular type of situation in the post-Second World War context, where the two sides had very, very little economic integration and trading relationship. Now we are seeing China being very integrated into the global economy and very much integrated with the United States economy. So that kind of Cold War relationship, I don't think is going to be restored. But we are going to see a much more complicated and complex relationship where the two sides will still be competing, but the two sides are very much aware that they really can't afford to see the other one collapse. Because if, for example, China's economy should collapse, it is going to affect the economies in the region and even the economy of the United States and, for that matter, Europe.
It's interesting because with that idea in mind, you know, the United States, in effect, if there's a competition, the United States wants to win, but at the same time, it doesn't want to see its opponent lose. I mean, are there going to be winners and losers here?
Well, at the moment, we are seeing the two countries engage in a contest, the trade war, where neither side is likely to emerge as the winner. We are looking at a contest where the result we are looking forward to is which one is going to lose more and suffer more as a result. We are not in a good place there.
As you look at this now, we looked at the situation at the APEC summit where there was a bit of a clash between China and the United States. We're looking ahead now to the G20 summit. As you watch this diplomacy play out, what should we be watching for?
Well, I think we are watching for the personal chemistry between Xi Jinping and Donald Trump. I would expect that Xi Jinping will do everything he can to try to charm Donald Trump, because that is one factor very much in China's favor, the strong relationship between Trump and Xi Jinping. And I would expect that Xi Jinping may be quite successful in how he engaged with Trump personally, but I wouldn't go so far as to say that this will then solve the basic problems between China and the United States. We should remember that when Donald Trump went to Beijing and was given the state visit plus arrangement, Donald Trump forgot to say in Beijing what he was meant to say. But when he got to Hanoi, he finally delivered the message that he was supposed to have delivered in Beijing. So the big picture, I don't think, is likely to be changed in a basic way at the Buenos Aires meeting.
Thank you very much for your expertise on this.
You're welcome.